On December 18, 2017, one of K-pop's brightest stars stopped shining.
Latest passing of a young K-pop superstar. Jonghyun, a member of boy band SHINee, died in an apparent suicide.
Kim Jonghyun, the main vocalist of SHINee, left the world in a way that sent shockwaves through South Korea and beyond.
생각한 대로 나를 판단했었기 때문에 거기에 대한 억울함이나
His death wasn't just the loss of a talented artist. It became a turning point that forced an entire industry to confront something it had been avoiding for far too long.
South Korea has the world's highest number of suicides, and the police found a burning in Kim's hotel room, something that's commonly used to induce carbon monoxide poisoning by people who've decided to take their own lives.
Who was Jonghyun? Kim Jonghyun wasn't just another K-pop idol. He was a true artist in every sense of the word. Born on April 8, 1990, he debuted with SHINee in 2008 under SM Entertainment, one of the biggest K-pop agencies. SHINee quickly became known for their experimental sound and sharp choreography, and Jonghyun stood out with his powerful, emotional voice that could move audiences to tears. But what really set him apart was his authenticity. While many idols stuck to safe, manufactured personas, Jonghyun wrote his own music, produced tracks for other artists, and wasn't afraid to be vulnerable. He penned deeply personal lyrics that explored loneliness, love, and pain. Songs like End of a Day and Before Our Spring revealed a sensitive soul who felt things deeply, perhaps too deeply for the brutal world he inhabited. He was also a radio host for 4 years on MBC's Blue Night, where he connected with fans on a more personal level, discussing everything from music to life struggles. His solo career flourished alongside SHINee's success with albums that showcased his artistic vision. By 2017, he had everything that should have made someone happy: fame, talent, respect from peers, and millions of devoted fans. Yet behind the stage lights and the smiles, something was breaking. December 18, 2017. The day started like any other winter Monday in Seoul, cold and ordinary. But for those close to Jonghyun, there were troubling signs. His older sister received a series of disturbing text messages from him that afternoon. The messages were alarming enough that she immediately knew something was terribly wrong. She contacted emergency services and one of Jonghyun's friends, desperately trying to locate him. Jonghyun had checked into a residential hotel-style apartment in the Cheongdam neighborhood of Gangnam, an upscale area of Seoul. It was a place where he could be alone, away from his actual residence. He had told people he was going there to rest. But rest wasn't what he had planned. Between the messages to his sister and the final moments, he was preparing to say goodbye. He sent final messages to people close to him. To his friend and fellow artist Nine, the lead singer of Dear Cloud, he had previously entrusted something important, a note with instructions to make it public if something happened to him. This wasn't a sudden impulse. It was planned, thought out, and devastatingly intentional. The preparations he made showed this wasn't a cry for help, but a conclusion he believed he had to reach. As evening approached, emergency services were racing against time. His sister's call had triggered a search, but would they find him in time? The densely packed neighborhood and the privacy of the rental accommodation worked against them. By the time authorities pinpointed his location, precious minutes had already slipped away. Those minutes would prove to be the difference between life and death. The discovery. Police and paramedics arrived at the residence in Cheongdam-dong around 6:10 p.m. What they found inside would confirm everyone's worst fears. Jonghyun was discovered unconscious in the apartment. The immediate signs pointed to carbon monoxide poisoning. He had used burning coal briquettes, a method that, tragically, has been used in other suicides in South Korea due to its accessibility and the false perception of it being painless. Emergency responders immediately began resuscitation efforts. He was rushed to the nearby Konkuk University Hospital, where medical staff fought to save his life. But the carbon monoxide had already done irreversible damage. Despite their efforts, Jonghyun was pronounced dead at the hospital. He was just 27 years old. The official time of death was logged, and the news began to spread quickly through official channels before it exploded across social media. SM Entertainment initially stayed silent as they confirmed the details, but within hours, the inevitable announcement came. The statement was brief and devastating. Jonghyun had left this world. The agency asked for respect for the family's grief and for people to refrain from spreading rumors or speculation. The location where he died became significant in the narrative. It wasn't his home, suggesting he specifically chose a place removed from his daily life, perhaps to spare those who were closest to him from the trauma of finding him in a familiar space. Even in his final act, there seemed to be consideration for others, a heartbreaking detail that made his death even more tragic for those processing the loss. The farewell note. 9. His trusted friend honored Jonghyun's wishes and released the note he had given her.
Jonghyun, the lead singer of boy band SHINee, has died in a possible suicide that's left fans around the world in shock.
It was posted on social media, and its raw honesty cut through the usual celebrity veneer. The note wasn't long, but every word carried the weight of his suffering. "I'm broken from inside," it began. "The depression that gnawed on me slowly has finally engulfed me entirely." He described feeling exhausted, like someone who wanted to run away from everything. He wrote about the voices in his head telling him to die, voices that had become impossible to ignore. "The life of fame was never for me," he confessed, despite spending nearly a decade in the spotlight. What struck readers most was his awareness of his condition and his inability to escape it. "Doctor, is this a relief that I'm going through?" he wrote, referencing his attempts to get help. "No, it's just your personality." That line revealed a devastating truth. Somewhere along the way, he'd been told that his pain was just who he was, not something that could be treated or cured. Whether this was truly what a doctor said or his interpretation of medical consultations, it showed how isolated he felt even when seeking help. He asked to be let go, to be told he did well. He wanted permission to leave, as if his suffering needed to be validated before he could end it. "Tell me I did well," he wrote repeatedly. The note ended with him asking to be sent off, his final request for peace. The note wasn't angry or accusatory. It was simply tired, the words of someone who had fought a battle nobody could see and finally had no strength left. The note sparked immediate conversation about mental health, but also controversy. Some questioned whether 9 should have released it, though she followed his explicit instructions. Others felt it provided necessary insight into what he was experiencing, giving context that might help others understand depression's severity. The investigation results. The police investigation was swift but thorough. Given Jonghyun's celebrity status and the circumstances, authorities needed to rule out foul play and confirm what appeared obvious from the scene. The apartment was examined and all evidence pointed to one conclusion. This was a suicide, carried out alone, with no external involvement. The cause of death was officially listed as carbon monoxide poisoning from burning coal briquettes. This method, while less common than it once was in South Korea, still accounts for a portion of suicide deaths in the country. The coal briquettes produce odorless, colorless carbon monoxide gas, which leads to unconsciousness and eventually death by preventing oxygen from reaching the blood and organs. Toxicology reports showed no unusual substances that would suggest impairment or drugging. There were no signs of struggle or forced entry into the apartment. Every piece of evidence supported what his farewell note and messages indicated. This was a planned, deliberate act by someone who felt they had no other option. The investigation also confirmed the timeline. The messages to his sister came in the hours before his death. The time between those messages and the discovery of his body was relatively short, but long enough that intervention became impossible. The police officially closed the case as a suicide, and no further investigation was deemed necessary. While this brought procedural closure, it did little to answer the bigger questions everyone was asking. How did it get this bad? Why didn't anyone see it coming? Could anything have been done? Warning signs. Hidden in plain sight. Looking back, Jonghyun had been telling people he was struggling for years, but like so many who suffer from depression, his cries for help were often disguised as art, misunderstood as sensitivity, or simply overlooked in an industry that prioritizes performance over well-being. His music was filled with references to pain and darkness. Lyrics from his songs explored themes of isolation, exhaustion, and emotional numbness. In Lonely, he sang about the feeling of being alone even when surrounded by people. End of a Day included lines about struggling to make it through each day and needing someone to tell him he did well, eerily echoing his final note. Fans loved these songs for their emotional depth, not realizing they were reading a map of his deteriorating mental state. In interviews and on his radio show, Jonghyun occasionally opened up about his struggles. He talked about difficulty sleeping, about feeling pressure, about anxiety. In 2015, during a concert, he broke down crying on stage and had to leave briefly. He later explained he'd been struggling with his condition that day. He openly mentioned seeing a psychiatrist, which in South Korea, where mental health stigma runs deep, was a brave admission. On social media, his posts sometimes took on darker tones. Cryptic messages about being tired or wanting to disappear appeared sporadically. But in the context of a busy celebrity's life, these were often interpreted as complaints about a hectic schedule rather than genuine distress signals. His last Instagram post, shared just hours before his death, was a simple photo with the caption, "Final goodbye," though it was only understood as such after the fact. Friends and colleagues later admitted they knew he struggled, but didn't realize how serious it was. This is tragically common with depression. Jonghyun was functional, professional, and still creating beautiful work. High-functioning depression can be especially deceptive because the person appears to be managing, even thriving, while internally they're falling apart. The warning signs were there, painted across his music, his words, and his actions, but they were hidden in plain sight, visible only in hindsight. The pressure cooker. To understand what happened to Jonghyun, you need to understand the K-pop industry. It's a machine designed to create perfect, polished products called idols. And while it produces incredible entertainment, it can destroy the people inside it. K-pop trainees often start young, sometimes as children, signing contracts that control nearly every aspect of their lives. They train for years, sometimes a decade, before debuting. Once they debut, the pressure multiplies. There are expectations to maintain a perfect image, to never show weakness, to be constantly grateful, and to work inhuman schedules. Sleep deprivation is normal. Privacy is non-existent. Every mistake is magnified and criticized by millions. The culture demands that idols be perpetually happy and grateful. Showing any sign of struggle or dissatisfaction can be seen as ungrateful or unprofessional. Mental health issues are particularly stigmatized in South Korea, where weakness is often viewed as a personal failing rather than a medical condition. Seeking help can be career damaging, as it might suggest you can't handle the pressures that come with success. For someone like Jonghyun, who felt things deeply and wasn't afraid to show vulnerability, this environment was particularly toxic. He was an artist in a system that often values marketability over artistry. He was a sensitive soul in an industry that rewards thick skin. The constant performance, both on and off stage, leaves no room for authentic struggle. You can't be depressed when you're supposed to be selling happiness. The workload alone is crushing. Idols juggle album promotions, variety show appearances, concerts, fan meetings, endorsements, and more, often with schedules packed from early morning until late night. Jonghyun, beyond his shiny commitments, had solo work, radio hosting, and songwriting. The schedule leaves no time for rest, let alone healing. When you're always performing, when do you get to be human? This pressure cooker environment has claimed other victims too. Jonghyun wasn't the first idol to die by suicide, and tragically, he wouldn't be the last. The system itself, built on extreme competition and impossible standards, creates conditions where mental health crises can flourish unchecked. Media and public reaction. The news of Jonghyun's death spread like wildfire.
유명 아이돌 그룹 샤이니의 종현, 본명 김종현 씨가 숨졌습니다. 경찰은 김종현 씨가 갈탄을 피우고 자살한 것으로 보고 있습니다.
Within hours, it dominated social media worldwide. The hashtag with his name trended globally on Twitter. Fans from every corner of the world expressed shock, grief, and disbelief. Many shared their favorite Jonghyun moments, his music, his kindness, trying to process the loss of someone who felt like a friend, even though most had never met him. In South Korea, the reaction was seismic. Major news outlets covered the story extensively. Television stations aired special segments about his life and career. The conversation quickly shifted from the fact of his death to the why behind it. Mental health became a national discussion topic overnight. People began questioning the K-pop industry's practices, the pressure on celebrities, and South Korea's cultural attitudes toward mental illness. SM Entertainment and SHINee's members released statements expressing their grief. The other members, Onu, Ki, Minho, and Taemin, were devastated. They had lost not just a bandmate, but a brother they'd worked alongside for nearly a decade. The funeral was held privately at a hospital in Seoul, with only family, close friends, and fellow artists in attendance. Fans held memorial gatherings around the world, creating spaces to grieve collectively. The media coverage was mostly respectful, though some outlets faced criticism for the way they reported details of his death. There were calls for more responsible reporting on suicides, following guidelines that avoid sensationalizing or providing explicit methods. The Korean media eventually adopted more careful language and approaches when covering similar incidents. Celebrities across the industry expressed their sorrow and shared their own struggles with mental health, helping to break down some of the stigma. The conversation that emerged wasn't just about mourning Jonghyun, but about preventing future tragedies. His death became a catalyst, forcing Korea to confront uncomfortable truths about success, pressure, and the hidden cost of fame. The aftermath for SHINee. For the 4 remaining members of SHINee, moving forward seemed impossible. How do you continue as a group when you've lost someone so integral to your identity? Jonghyun wasn't just the main vocalist, he was their friend, their creative collaborator, and for nearly 10 years, a constant presence in their lives. The group went on hiatus following his death. Each member processed their grief differently. Some withdrew from public view entirely, others found solace in work. Taemin later said that continuing to perform was a way to honor Jonghyun's memory. He mentioned struggling with survivor's guilt and questioning whether he could have done something differently. In 2018, SHINee returned with new music. The decision to continue as 4 wasn't made lightly, but they chose to keep going, in part because they believed Jonghyun would have wanted them to. Their performances changed, though. At concerts, they leave space for Jonghyun. His microphone sometimes stands empty on stage. His voice still appears in their songs through recordings. Fans sing his parts at concerts, filling the void as best they can. The members have been open about their grief in ways that are uncommon in K-pop. They talk about missing him, about how difficult it is to perform without him, about keeping his memory alive. This openness has been healing for fans and has contributed to broader conversations about loss and mental health. SHINee's continued success is bittersweet. Each achievement is tinged with the knowledge that it should have been celebrated by 5, not 4. Yet they persist, carrying Jonghyun's legacy forward through their music and their message. They've become advocates for mental health awareness, using their platform to encourage people to seek help and to be kind to one another. What changed since then? Jonghyun's death didn't happen in a vacuum. It sparked real changes in South Korea and the K-pop industry, though whether those changes go far enough remains debatable. Mental health became a mainstream conversation topic in a country where it had long been taboo. People started talking more openly about depression, anxiety, and the importance of seeking professional help. Entertainment companies publicly committed to better mental health support for their artists. Some agencies implemented counseling services and wellness programs. Whether these changes are substantial or merely performative varies by company. The industry still operates on the same basic model of intense training and pressure, but there's at least acknowledgement now that mental health matters. Several other high-profile suicides in the years following Jonghyun's death, including idols Sully and Gu Hara, reinforced the urgency of these conversations. Each tragedy prompted renewed calls for industry reform, better mental health care, and reduced cyberbullying.
The World Health Organization has reported that the suicide rate in South Korea has more than doubled over the past 12 years.
The Korean government introduced policies aimed at better mental health support and suicide prevention, though implementation and effectiveness remain ongoing challenges. Fans became more conscious of the language they use and the pressure they place on idols. There's greater awareness now that the people on stage are human beings with limits, not manufactured products designed to satisfy every expectation. The culture of protecting idols' mental well-being has strengthened within fan communities. Yet despite these positive shifts, the fundamental pressures of the industry remain. The training system, the punishing schedules, the lack of privacy, these haven't drastically changed. What has changed is the conversation. Mental health is no longer completely invisible. Seeking help is slightly less stigmatized. That's progress, even if it's not enough. Jonghyun's death forced a reckoning that continues today, a painful reminder that behind every perfect performance is a human being who might be struggling in ways we cannot see. His legacy extends beyond music. He became a symbol for mental health awareness, proof that success and fame don't protect you from inner darkness. His story reminds us that asking for help is strength, not weakness, and that we need to create spaces where people can be honest about their struggles without fear of judgment. The conversation he started with his life and his death continues, and in that continuation, there's hope that fewer people will feel as alone as he did in his final days.